The first time my father told the family I was no longer part of the future, I was standing behind the dining room door with a folder in my hand. Inside that folder was the contract that could have saved our company. I had spent 11 months negotiating it. 3 banks had rejected us. 2 investors had walked away. Our suppliers were demanding payment, and our flagship division was bleeding money every quarter. But I had finally found a way out. I had built a restructuring plan, secured a private investor, and convinced a logistics group to sign a long-term partnership. All I needed was my father's signature. Instead, I heard him say, "Adrian isn't ready to inherit anything." My younger brother laughed. Then maybe he should stop acting like he already owns the company. I stood completely still. My mother said nothing. My father continued, "From tomorrow, Marcus will take over the executive development division. Adrian can remain in operations if he wants." My hand tightened around the folder. Operations. The department nobody respected. The department I had built from the ground up. I walked into the dining room. Everyone turned toward me. I placed the folder on the table. I solved the cash flow problem. My father barely glanced at it. "Not tonight." It took me almost a year. And I said, "Not tonight." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Pretend every problem needs you to save it." I looked at him. He was wearing the watch father had given him that morning. A gold watch that had belonged to my grandfather. The same watch I had been promised as a child. I smiled faintly. I didn't realize saving the company had become embarrassing. Father's expression hardened. "Enough." I looked around the table. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My sister Elena was staring at her plate. Marcus looked satisfied. And suddenly, something inside me became very quiet. Not broken. Quiet. That night, I remembered being 8 years old. Grandfather had taken me into his study after I had fixed an old mechanical calculator he kept on his desk. He had laughed and said, "You don't need to be the loudest person in the room, Adrian. Learn to understand what everyone else ignores." I had remembered those words for 20 years. I had built my entire life around them. So I had stayed silent when Marcus took credit for my projects. I had stayed silent when father gave him promotions he hadn't earned. I had stayed silent when mother told me, "Your brother needs more confidence." I had stayed silent when Elena asked me to cover for Marcus after he lost a major client. I had stayed silent because I believed family meant patience. That night, I finally understood something. Patience without boundaries becomes permission. I picked up the folder from the table. Father frowned. "What are you doing?" "Nothing." "Adrian." I looked at him. For the first time, nothing. Marcus laughed. "You'll come back tomorrow." I didn't answer. I walked upstairs. I packed 1 suitcase. Not 2. Not 3. 1. I left my company car in the garage. I left the apartment my father had given me. I left the expensive watch. I left every photograph except one. It was a picture of grandfather standing beside me in the old factory. Before I left, I returned to the dining room. Everyone was still awake. Mother looked nervous. "Where are you going?" "I don't know yet." Father stood. "This is childish." "No." I looked at him calmly. "What's childish is spending my entire life trying to convince my own family that I'm worth trusting." The room went silent. Marcus crossed his arms. "You'll be back in a week." I looked at him. "I won't." He smiled. "You always come back." I opened the door. That's because I always thought this was home. Then I walked away. None of them followed me. And none of them knew that the folder I had carried downstairs contained something else. A second document. A company registration. One I had quietly prepared 6 months earlier. A company whose name nobody in my family had ever heard. A company that, at that moment, owned nothing more than a small rented office, 3 employees, and the last of my personal savings. I didn't know how far it would go. I only knew one thing. I was done waiting for my family to decide whether I belonged. The first morning away from my family felt strangely peaceful. There was no assistant knocking on my door. No messages from Marcus asking me to repair his mistakes. No father demanding reports. No mother reminding me to be patient. I woke up in a cheap hotel room with sunlight coming through thin curtains and realized I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. For 20 years, my schedule had belonged to the family company. Now I had nothing. At least, that's what everyone believed. By noon, I was sitting in a rented office above a closed furniture shop. The room was barely large enough for 4 desks. The paint was peeling. The air conditioner made a terrible noise. My 3 employees looked at me nervously. Nora, my former financial analyst, put a cup of coffee on my desk. "You really left?" "Yes." "Without negotiating?" "Yes." She stared at me. "Your father is going to come after you." "I know. Marcus will destroy the company." "I know. And you're sitting here drinking coffee?" I looked at the empty office. I've been waiting 20 years to sit somewhere nobody expects anything from me. Nora smiled. "You're strange." "Probably." She handed me a folder. "What about the company?" I opened it. Inside were the designs I'd worked on privately for years. Not family company projects. Mine. A new logistics intelligence platform. It used predictive data to identify supply chain failures before they happened. I had originally created the prototype while working in my father's company. They had rejected it twice. Marcus had called it an expensive spreadsheet, so I had stopped showing it to them. Instead, I improved it quietly. For 6 years. Every night. Every weekend. Every time the family thought I was wasting my time. Now I was finally ready. But building technology was easier than building trust. Our first month was brutal. A potential client canceled after learning I was no longer connected to my family's company. Another demanded a price we couldn't survive on. Our server crashed twice. One employee quit. The landlord threatened to lock us out because our payment was late. For the first time in my adult life, I was terrified. There was no family safety net. No company accountant. No father. No inherited position. Just me. One night, I sat alone in the office at 2 in the morning. Nora found me staring at the financial projections. "We're running out of money." "I know. You could call your father." I shook my head. "He'd help." "That isn't the point." "What is?" I looked at her. "I don't want to build my life by borrowing permission from people who already decided I wasn't worth keeping." She was quiet. Then she said, "So what are you going to do?" I closed the laptop. "Build something they can't take away." The next morning, we changed everything. Instead of chasing large corporations, we approached small manufacturers. Instead of selling a complicated system, we solved one problem at a time. We helped a textile factory reduce delivery delays, then a food distributor, then a medical equipment supplier. The results spread. Slowly. Painfully. But they spread. 6 months later, we had 14 clients. A year later, 43. We hired engineers, then analysts, then regional managers. Our tiny office became 3 floors, and I still refused to move into a luxurious headquarters. Every morning, I walked through the office and spoke to people by name. I had learned something from leaving my family. A company wasn't built by the person sitting at the top. It was built by people who believed their work mattered. Meanwhile, back home, my family had moved on. At least, that's what I heard. Marcus was officially named vice chairman. My father announced that I had chosen another path. At family events, people stopped asking where I was. My photograph disappeared from the company website. My office became Marcus's office. My name was removed from old project files. Even a portrait of grandfather was moved from the hallway. For a while, that hurt. Then it stopped. I had begun building something new. And somewhere between the 15th client and our first major international contract, I realized I no longer wanted my old life back. Then one afternoon, Nora walked in my office holding a newspaper. She looked pale. "Adrian." "What happened?" She placed it on my desk. The headline made my heart stop. "Vantage Group announces major expansion after acquiring strategic technology partner." Vantage Group, my family's company. I read the article. Their expansion depended on a logistics platform they had purchased from another firm. A platform that was dangerously similar to the one I had created years earlier. But there was something else. At the bottom of the article was a list of their new strategic partners. My eye stopped on one name. The company listed third was ours. My secret company. The one my family didn't know existed. And apparently, neither did they know that their biggest new partner was owned by the son they had already forgotten. I looked at Nora. Did they know? She shook her head. No. I slowly closed the newspaper. For the first time since I left home, I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I finally understood. I hadn't disappeared from my family's story. I had simply become the part of it they could no longer control. The next morning, I received an email from Vantage Group. Not from my father. Not from Marcus. From their legal department. The subject line was simple. Strategic Partnership Review. I stared at it for several seconds. Nora stood across from my desk. They still don't know it's you. I know. Are you going to tell them? I leaned back. No. She raised an eyebrow. Why? Because this partnership has nothing to do with my family. That sounds convincing. It is. She smiled. You're enjoying this. I shook my head. No. I'm enjoying being free. There was a difference. Our company, Northbridge Systems, had become one of the fastest-growing logistics technology firms in the region. But we were still young enough to be underestimated. Vantage wanted our technology integrated into 27 of their distribution centers. It was the largest contract we had ever received, and it terrified me because I knew exactly how my family operated. They would assume the smaller company needed them more than they needed us. They would negotiate aggressively. They would demand control. They would expect obedience. They had no idea that the person sitting on the other side of the negotiation table was the son they had dismissed. I instructed our legal team to handle the first meetings. I stayed behind the scenes. For 3 weeks, negotiations continued. Every report came across my desk. Vantage's executives pushed for controlling rights. We refused. They asked for exclusive access to our algorithms. We refused. They wanted the right to appoint members to our board. We refused. Finally, they offered an enormous acquisition price. Nora walked in my office holding the proposal. They're serious. I know. They want to buy us. I looked at the number. It was enough money to change my life forever. But I shook my head. Reject it. She stared at me. Adrian, that's more than anything you could have inherited. I don't want to sell. Why? I looked through the glass wall at my employees. Because I didn't build this to become someone else's property. That afternoon, Vantage's CEO requested a meeting with our founder. They wanted to know who was behind Northbridge. For the first time, my anonymity became difficult to maintain. I agreed to meet them, but I chose the location carefully. Not Vantage headquarters, not a luxury hotel, our own office. When the elevator doors opened, I saw Marcus. He stepped out first. Behind him were 2 executives and a lawyer. He was wearing the same expensive confidence I remembered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His eyes moved across the office, then back to me. His face changed. Adrian, I nodded. He looked genuinely confused. What are you doing here? I almost laughed. It was the strangest question anyone had ever asked me. I work here. He stared at me. You? Yes. His expression hardened. This is your company? I didn't answer immediately. Nora stepped beside me. Our founder is Adrian Vale. Marcus looked at her, then at me, then back at her. No. I smiled faintly. Yes. He took a step backward. You built this? Yes. With what money? My money. Where did you get? Does it matter? He stopped. For the first time in my life, Marcus had no prepared answer. He looked around again. The engineers, the offices, the screens displaying our network, the employees greeting me respectfully. This wasn't the desperate man who had walked out of the family house with 1 suitcase. This was something he didn't understand. I had become founder, not an heir, not a son waiting for approval. A founder. Marcus finally whispered, "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at him. You never asked. His jaw tightened. Our father would have supported you. I almost smiled. Would he? You know he would. No, Marcus. I walked toward the conference room. He supported the person he thought I should become. He never supported the person I actually was. He followed me. Adrian, whatever happened between us? Nothing happened between us. He frowned. That isn't true. It is. I opened the conference room door. You chose your life. He said nothing. I chose mine. We sat across from each other. The executives began discussing the contract. For the next 2 hours, I treated Vantage exactly like every other client. No special treatment. No revenge. No favors. No hostility. Just business. At the end of the meeting, Marcus remained behind. Can I talk to you? I nodded. He closed the door. You've changed. So have you. He looked down. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I know. We thought you'd come back. I know. Father thought you'd get tired. I know. He swallowed. Mother missed you. That sentence almost broke through my defenses. Almost. I looked away. I missed her too. Then, come home. I turned back. Home? Yes. I shook my head. You're asking me to return to a house where my room was given away and my name was erased from the company? Marcus looked ashamed. I didn't know about the room. I believe you. That was the painful part. I believed him. He wasn't entirely cruel. He was simply accustomed to receiving what I was expected to sacrifice. And sometimes that was worse. Before he left, he stopped at the door. Father will want to see you. I said nothing. He'll be proud. I looked at him. Maybe. Then he left. I thought the meeting was over. I was wrong, because 3 days later, my mother appeared outside my office. Alone. She didn't call. She didn't announce herself. She simply stood in the reception area, holding an old photograph. When I saw her, 20 years of memories came rushing back. Sunday breakfasts, school competitions, her waiting outside hospitals when I was sick, her voice telling me, one day you'll understand why families make difficult choices. I had spent years trying to understand. Now she was standing in front of me, and I wasn't sure I wanted the answer anymore. My mother sat across from me for nearly a minute without speaking. She placed a photograph on my desk. It was the same picture of grandfather and me at the factory. You kept it, she whispered. Yes. I thought you threw everything away. I didn't. She touched the edge of the photograph. Your father was wrong. I looked at her. She had never said those words before. Not once. What was he wrong about? She took a breath. About you. The room suddenly felt smaller. She continued. He thought you were too cautious to lead. I said nothing. He thought Marcus had the confidence the company needed. I know. He didn't understand that you were building something different. I looked at her carefully. And you? She lowered her eyes. I understood. That hurt more than if she had denied it. You understood? Yes. Then why didn't you say anything? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I was afraid. Of father. She nodded. And of losing the family. I stared at her. You kept the family together by letting me disappear. She flinched. I know. I looked out the window. Outside, employees were walking between buildings, carrying laptops and coffee. My life continued. My mother's did too. But for a moment, we were simply a mother and son who had spent too many years avoiding one painful truth. I waited for you, she whispered. No. She looked at me. You didn't. I did. You waited for me to come back. She nodded. That isn't the same as coming to find me. She looked down. I was wrong. I closed my eyes. That sentence had been missing from my childhood. I had wanted it for years. Now that I finally heard it, it didn't feel victorious. It felt sad. She reached into her bag and pulled out another document. Your grandfather left this for you. I froze. What is it? A letter. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Grandfather's handwriting filled the page. He had written it 2 years before he died. I had never seen it. The letter wasn't about inheritance. It wasn't about money. It said he believed the family would eventually pressure me to become someone I wasn't. He wrote that if I ever felt I had to choose between keeping the family happy and protecting the work I believed in, I should choose the work. Because a family that loved me would eventually understand. And if they didn't, I should build a life where I didn't need their permission. I read the final line twice. Never confuse belonging with obedience. My vision blurred. Mother watched silently. I should have given this to you years ago. Yes. I was afraid your father would think your grandfather was choosing you over Marcus. And now I realize your grandfather wasn't choosing an heir. She smiled sadly. He was choosing your freedom. I folded the letter carefully. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Mother asked, will you come home? I shook my head. She closed her eyes. I thought you might. I can forgive you. She looked at me. But I can't go back. A tear slipped down her cheek. Why? Because going back would mean pretending nothing changed. She nodded slowly. I understand. Before leaving, she hugged me. I stood still for a moment. Then I hugged her back. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. It was simply proof that some love could survive even after trust had been damaged. 3 weeks later, the Vantage partnership went live. Their first distribution center reduced delays by 31%. Then another. Then another. Industry publications began writing about Northbridge. Investors came. Competitors called. Our valuation doubled, then tripled. And suddenly, people started asking the question my family had never asked. Who is Adrian Vale? The answer spread quickly. Founder, chief architect, major shareholder, and former heir of Vantage Group. The moment that article appeared, everything changed. My father called me. I watched his name flash across my phone. I didn't answer. He called again. I still didn't answer. Then Marcus sent a message. Father wants to meet. This time he's asking. I stared at those words. Asking. Not ordering. Not demanding. Asking. I eventually replied. I'll come. The meeting took place at the old family headquarters. The same building where I had spent half my life. The same lobby where my portrait had once hung. When I walked through the doors, employees looked at me differently. Some recognized me immediately. Others whispered. I walked past the reception desk. On the wall was a new corporate display. Vantage Group, Northbridge Systems, Strategic Partnership. My company logo was larger than I expected. For the first time, I understood what my family had begun to realize. They hadn't lost an employee when I left. They had lost the person who understood how to move their future forward. And now they were trying to decide whether they could ask me to save them. But they still didn't know the most important part. Their financial problems were far worse than they appeared. And I had already seen the numbers. Because while everyone was celebrating the partnership, I had discovered something hidden inside Vantage's books. Someone had been moving money out of the company for years, and the trail led somewhere I never expected. The first thing I noticed when I entered my father's office was that he had aged. Not dramatically, just enough that I could see it. The man who once filled every room with his voice was sitting behind the same walnut desk, staring at financial reports like they had personally betrayed him. Marcus was standing beside the window. Elena sat quietly on the sofa. My mother wasn't there. Father looked up. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You look well." "I am." He nodded. "You built a remarkable company." "Thank you." His eyes lowered to the report in front of him. "I didn't know." "I know." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Father looked at him. "Leave us." Marcus hesitated. "Dad, please." That word surprised me. Marcus left. The door closed. Father leaned back. "I owe you an apology." I waited. He looked toward the window. "I treated you as though you were incapable of carrying the company." "You did." "I was wrong." "Yes." He looked at me. "You don't have to make this difficult." "I'm not." That was the truth. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger required energy. I'd spent mine years ago. Father took a deep breath. "Vantage is in trouble." "I know." His expression changed. "Ow. I've seen the financial reports. You were never given access." "No." I placed a folder on his desk. "I didn't need access." He opened it. Inside were transaction records, supplier payments, consulting invoices, and transfers between several subsidiaries. His face became pale. "How did you get these?" "Public filings. Partnership data. Our own audit." He flipped through the pages. "This can't be right." "It is. There are accounting irregularities." "More than irregularities." I pointed to several transactions. "Money has been leaving Vantage through 3 consulting companies." Father stared at the names. "I don't recognize them." "You're not supposed to." He looked up. "Who owns them?" I didn't answer. He searched the documents, then stopped. One name appeared repeatedly. Elias Grant, the man who had served as Vantage's chief financial officer for 11 years. Father whispered, "Elias." "He resigned 6 months ago." I thought he retired. He didn't. I slid another document toward him. He moved the money through shell companies before leaving. Father's hands trembled. "How much?" "Enough to put several divisions at risk." He sank back into his chair. For the first time, I saw something I had never seen in him before. Fear. Not fear of losing money. Fear of losing everything he had built. "Why are you telling me?" "Because our companies are partners now." He looked at me. "That's all." I paused. "No." He waited. "Because despite everything, I don't want to watch you lose the company." His eyes became wet. I looked away. I didn't want gratitude. I didn't want praise. I simply wanted the truth to be handled properly. Father whispered, "You could have let us collapse." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" "Because I left to build my own life. I didn't leave hoping yours would burn." He lowered his head. That sentence stayed between us. After I left the office, Marcus caught up with me in the hallway. "What happened?" "Your father knows." "About Elias?" I stopped. Marcus stared at me. You knew. I suspected something. Why didn't you tell him? I tried. When? Before you left. He looked confused. I warned Father that Elias was moving money, and he told me to stop interfering with finance. I stared at him. Another piece of the past fell into place. So many times I'd thought my warnings were ignored because my family didn't trust me. But there had been people deliberately protecting their own interests. And Father had been too proud to listen. Marcus rubbed his face. I'm sorry. I looked at him. For what? For all of it. I nodded. I know. He expected something more. I gave him nothing. He laughed bitterly. You really don't hate me anymore, do you? No. That almost makes me feel worse. It should. He looked at me. Why? Because I used to spend a lot of time imagining you would someday understand. I paused. Now I don't need you to. He looked away. That evening, Vantage's board held an emergency meeting. I wasn't a board member. I didn't want to be. But because Northbridge was now a major strategic partner, I was invited as an external technology advisor. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Elias's fraud was only part of the problem. Vantage had expanded too quickly. Several acquisitions were draining cash. 2 factories were operating at a loss. And Marcus had inherited an executive structure built around appearances rather than efficiency. The board wanted a solution. One director said, we should sell the logistics division. Another said, we should cut half the workforce. Marcus looked at me. Adrian, everyone turned. I hadn't spoken in almost 20 minutes. I opened my notebook. Neither. The room became quiet. We don't need to destroy the company. I looked at the board. We need to stop pretending it is still the company grandfather built. My father stared at me. I continued. The market changed. Vantage didn't. I outlined a restructuring plan. Close the failing acquisitions. Protect the profitable manufacturing units. Integrate Northbridge's technology. Sell and use properties. Renegotiate supplier agreements. And most importantly, stop treating family loyalty as a substitute for competence. That final sentence created silence. Marcus looked at the floor. Father closed his eyes. I knew exactly what they were thinking, because for 20 years, I had been the one person in the family who had believed that. The meeting ended near midnight. As I walked toward the elevator, Father followed me. Come back. I stopped. He said it quietly. Not as an employee. I turned. Then what? He swallowed. Help me rebuild it. I looked at him. The old me would have said yes immediately. The son who had spent his entire life waiting for those words would have forgotten every wound. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'll help. His face softened. But I won't come back. He stared at me. Why? Because you need a company. I paused. I don't need your company. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. And for the first time, Father didn't tell me to stop. He simply watched me leave. The next 6 months changed everything. Northbridge became Vantage's most important technology partner, but I refused to take a position inside the family company. Instead, I built a restructuring team independent from the family. We worked with their executives. We replaced outdated systems. We renegotiated contracts. We closed divisions that had been losing money for years. It was painful. People were laid off. Factories were consolidated. Some executives resigned. I hated every part of it. But businesses didn't survive because leaders avoided difficult decisions. They survived because leaders made honest ones. Marcus surprised me. He worked harder than I had ever seen him work. For the first time, he stopped trying to impress Father. He started listening. He spent nights visiting factories. He sat with workers. He learned the numbers. One evening, he came to my office. I finally understand. I looked up. Understand what? Why you were always frustrated. I smiled slightly. Took you long enough. He laughed. I was an idiot. You were young. I was 32. So was I. He looked down. You really won't come back? No. Even if Father makes you chairman? No. Even if he gives you everything? I shook my head. I don't want everything anymore. He was quiet. Then he asked, what do you want? I looked at the city outside. To wake up without wondering whether I'm enough for someone else. He nodded. I think I understand. Maybe he finally did. Meanwhile, my relationship with Mother slowly changed. She began visiting Northbridge once every few weeks. She never asked me to return. She never defended father. She simply came. Sometimes we had lunch. Sometimes we talked about grandfather. Sometimes we sat silently. One afternoon, she brought me an old box. Inside were childhood things. A broken toy car, my first school medal, a faded birthday card, and a small brass key. I recognized it immediately. Grandfather's study. She smiled. He gave it to you when you were 16. I forgot. He told me you would remember when you needed it. I held the key. What does it open? She looked at me. The old factory archive. My heart stopped. The old factory had been closed for years. Grandfather had owned a small manufacturing operation before Vantage became an empire. I had spent my childhood there. We drove together the following weekend. The factory looked abandoned. Dust covered the windows. The old sign was almost unreadable. Inside, the smell of metal and wood brought back memories I hadn't realized I still carried. Grandfather teaching me how machines worked. Grandfather telling me to observe before acting. Grandfather letting me sit beside him during meetings. We found the archive room at the back. The brass key opened a cabinet. Inside were notebooks, blueprints, old patents, and one envelope with my name on it. My hand shook. Mother whispered, I never knew that was there. I opened it. Grandfather had written another letter. But this one was different. It contained an idea, a business model he had once wanted to build, but abandoned because Vantage was expanding too quickly. A network of independent manufacturing hubs connected through shared technology. The idea was decades ahead of its time. I read the documents slowly. Then I looked at Mother. He was thinking about Northbridge before Northbridge existed. She smiled through tears. Maybe he knew you would finish it. I didn't know whether I believed that, but I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to finish what he had started. Not for Vantage, not for the family name, for myself. Over the next year, Northbridge expanded into manufacturing technology. We helped small factories modernize without selling themselves to giant corporations. It became my real purpose. I wasn't just building software anymore. I was building opportunities. And something unexpected happened. A woman named Clara joined our leadership team. She had been working in industrial design for years. She didn't care about my family. She didn't care that I was an heir. She didn't even seem impressed by Northbridge. On her first day, she walked into my office, dropped a stack of reports on my desk, and said, Your production model is inefficient. I stared at her. You've been here 12 hours, and I've already found 3 problems. I laughed. Welcome to Northbridge. She smiled. I think I'm going to like it here. Over time, Clara became the first person I trusted without fear. She never asked what my family thought. She asked what I thought. When I doubted myself, she challenged me. When I worked too much, she dragged me outside. When I succeeded, she celebrated quietly. There was no manipulation, no competition, no need to earn affection, just peace. For the first time, love didn't feel like something I had to win. It felt like something I could simply receive. Then, just when life seemed settled, I received a call from Father. His voice was different. Adrian. Yes. I need to tell you something. What happened? There was a long silence. Vantage has received an acquisition offer. From whom? He said the name. I froze. Because it wasn't a competitor. It wasn't a bank. It wasn't an investment group. It was a multinational corporation that had been trying to eliminate Northbridge for the past year. And they had made one condition clear. If Vantage accepted the offer, Northbridge would lose its largest strategic partner. My family wasn't just asking me for help anymore. Their decision could determine whether the company I built survived. The offer was worth more money than Vantage had ever received for a single division. And that was exactly why I didn't trust it. I sat across from Father in the same conference room where, years earlier, he had told me I wasn't ready to inherit anything. Marcus was there. So were 6 board members. The acquisition documents were spread across the table. Father looked exhausted. They'll take 70% of the company, he said. And you keep 30? He nodded. Enough to protect the family. I studied the proposal. No. Marcus looked at me. You haven't even heard everything. I've heard enough. One board member frowned. You're not a shareholder of Vantage. No. Then you have no authority to reject anything. I looked at him. Correct. He seemed satisfied. Then I added, but if you accept this offer, Northbridge will terminate the partnership. The room went silent. The board member leaned forward. You can't do that. Yes, I can. Our companies are contractually connected, and the contract contains a change of control clause. He stopped speaking. Father looked at me. You'd really walk away? I would protect my company. Marcus lowered his eyes. That answer would have shocked the old Adrian. The old Adrian would have sacrificed everything to save Vantage. Now I understood the difference between loyalty and self-destruction. Father rubbed his forehead. They're offering enough money to save thousands of jobs. And then what? He didn't answer. I opened another folder. They'll dismantle the manufacturing divisions. One director shook his head. That's speculation. No. I slid documents across the table. It's their acquisition history. I had spent 3 days studying the buyer. Every company they acquired followed the same pattern. They bought. They consolidated. They sold the valuable assets. They closed the factories. They eliminated the technology divisions. Vantage would survive on paper. Its soul wouldn't. Father stared at the documents. How did you find this? Because I learned how to recognize people who smile while taking something away. No one spoke. Then Marcus said, "What do we do?" I looked at him. We refuse. The board erupted. Some wanted the money. Some fear bankruptcy. Others blamed Marcus. One director accused him of destroying the company. Marcus didn't respond. He simply listened. After the meeting, he found me outside. I thought you'd hate this. What? That we're finally in trouble. I shook my head. I never wanted you to suffer. You could have let us fail. Yes. Why didn't you? Because I don't need revenge to prove I was right. He looked at me for a long moment. Then what do you need? Nothing from you. That answer seemed to hurt him, but it was the truth. Over the next several weeks, we built an alternative. Northbridge would invest in Vantage. Not to own it, to stabilize it. My board objected. Clara objected. Even Nora objected. You're risking too much, Nora told me. I know. You spent years building Northbridge. I know. And now you're putting it into your family's company? Not my family's company. I corrected her. A company with thousands of employees who had nothing to do with what my family did to me. She sighed. You really can't stop helping people. Apparently not. Clara stood beside the window. You know what scares me? What? That you're still trying to prove you aren't the person they thought you were. I looked at her. She continued. You don't need to save Vantage to prove your father was wrong. Her words stayed with me. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about grandfather, about the factory, about my father's voice, about the day I left with one suitcase. I finally realized something. I had built Northbridge because I wanted freedom, but I was still carrying my family inside my decisions. Even when I said I didn't care, even when I refused their money, even when I told myself I had moved on, part of me was still trying to show them what they had lost. Clara found me the next morning. You look terrible. I didn't sleep. Why? I think I've been building this company for the wrong reason. She sat beside me, then changed the reason. I looked at her. What if I don't know how? Start with this. She pointed at the city. Build something you would still build if your family never knew your name. I smiled. That sounds difficult. Good things usually are. So I changed the plan. Northbridge would invest only enough to protect the partnership. No ownership. No control. No rescue mission. Vantage would have to save itself. Father agreed. Marcus agreed. The board had no choice. The multinational withdrew its offer. Vantage survived, but the consequences were severe. Marcus lost his position as vice chairman. The board replaced several executives. Father stepped down as CEO. For the first time in decades, Vantage became a professionally managed company. Marcus was offered a smaller role. He accepted. Father retired. And suddenly, the family empire I'd spent my childhood imagining was no longer controlled by my family. I expected to feel something. Victory. Relief. Maybe satisfaction. Instead, I felt strangely empty. Then Father called me. Can you come over? I almost refused, but I went. His house was quieter than I remembered. The dining table was smaller. Or maybe I had simply grown. He poured 2 glasses of water. I've been thinking, that sounds dangerous. He laughed softly. I deserve that. We sat down. He looked at me. I thought being a father meant preparing you to inherit what I built. I said nothing, but I was wrong. He stared at his hands. My job was to help you build what you wanted. My throat tightened. I didn't know how to do that. I know. He looked up. And I lost years with you because of it. I nodded. You did. I can't get them back. No. He swallowed. But maybe I can stop losing the years that remain. That was the first time I saw my father not as the head of Vantage. Not as the man who had judged me. Just as an aging father who finally understood what his pride had cost him. I didn't forgive him immediately. But I didn't leave either. We talked for 3 hours. About grandfather. About the factory. About Marcus. About my childhood. And eventually about the night I left. Father said, I thought you'd return. I know. I waited. I know. Why didn't you? I looked at him. Because every day I stayed away, I became more myself. He closed his eyes. I understand now. I believed him. Maybe that was enough. A year passed. Vantage stabilized. Northbridge became an industry leader. And my relationship with my family became something I never expected. Not close. Not distant. Something in between. Mother and I spoke every Sunday. Marcus and I occasionally worked together on projects. Father came to Northbridge twice a month. He never gave advice unless I asked. That small change meant more than any apology. Clara and I became partners in every sense of the word. One evening, she asked me to meet her on the roof of our headquarters. The city lights stretched below us. She handed me a small box. I opened it. Inside was a brass key. I stared at it. Where did you get this? She smiled. Your mother gave it to me. What does it open? You'll see. The next morning, she drove me to the old factory. I thought the place had been abandoned. Instead, workers were inside, renovating. I looked at Clara. What is this? She smiled. You told me grandfather wanted to build a network of independent manufacturing hubs. Yes. So I helped make it real. My chest tightened. The project wasn't called Vantage. It wasn't called Northbridge. It carried grandfather's original working name, Meridian Works. Small manufacturers could join. They would share technology, logistics, training, and purchasing power. But they wouldn't surrender ownership. It was exactly the kind of company grandfather had dreamed about. I walked through the renovated factory. Machines were running. Young engineers were working. Small business owners were touring the facility. I felt something inside me settle. This was the purpose I had been searching for. Not beating Vantage. Not proving father wrong. Not becoming richer than Marcus. Building something that gave people what I had once needed. A place where talent mattered more than family position. A place where people could grow without begging to be recognized. That night, I called father. I finished grandfather's idea. He was silent. Then he asked, does it work? Yes. He laughed. I knew you would. I looked at the factory lights. I wish he could see it. So do I. There was another silence. Then father said, I'm proud of you. The words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I had wanted them. I had imagined hearing them at dinners, at promotions, at board meetings, at every moment when I had sacrificed something for the family. But now, standing inside a factory I had built for myself, they didn't control me anymore. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. The following month, Meridian Works opened its first regional center. The press came. Investors came. Local manufacturers came. And then someone asked the question I knew would come eventually. Isn't this the son of Vantage's former chairman? I smiled. Yes. Are you planning to take over Vantage? No. Why not? I looked at the cameras. Because I already built what I wanted. The clip went viral. Within weeks, Meridian Works became a symbol of independent industrial development. And something unexpected happened. People from Vantage began applying to work with us. Not because we paid the most, because they wanted to be part of something new. Among the applicants was Marcus. I stared at his resume for a long time. Clara stood behind me. Are you going to hire him? I don't know. What do you want? I looked at his application. For the first time, I didn't see my younger brother. I saw a man who had finally stopped trying to be father. I called him. Why do you want to join Meridian? He answered honestly. Because I finally know what kind of leader I want to become. I paused. And what kind is that? Not the kind who inherits power. He took a breath. The kind who earns trust. I smiled. Come a Monday. He laughed. Seriously? Yes. Why? Because if you want a new life, you should get the chance to build one too. There was silence. Then he said, "Thank you." After the call, Clara looked at me. "You've changed." "I know. Do you regret leaving?" I thought about it. "No, not even once." I smiled. "I regret needing to leave." She nodded. "But not leaving." I wrapped my arm around her. Outside, the city was glowing. For years, I believed my greatest achievement would be becoming the heir my family wanted. Then I believed it would be becoming richer than them. I was wrong both times. My greatest achievement was becoming someone who could walk away without bitterness. Someone who could forgive without surrendering his boundaries. Someone who could love his family without living for their approval. And someone who could build a future so meaningful that the past no longer had the power to define him. But I didn't know that one final chapter was waiting. Because 2 weeks later, Father called me again. This time, he didn't sound calm. He said only 4 words. "Your grandfather left more." And suddenly, the life I thought I understood had another secret buried beneath it. I thought my grandfather had already left me everything that mattered. His letters, his lessons, his old factory, his belief that I should build something of my own. I was wrong. When Father told me there was more, I went to Vantage headquarters the following morning. He was waiting in the old archive room, the same room where Grandfather had kept his private records. On the table sat a black metal box. I recognized it immediately. I had seen it once when I was a child. Grandfather had caught me trying to open it. He had smiled and said, "Not yet." Now Father pushed it toward me. "He left this for you." I stared at the box. "Why didn't you open it?" "Because the instructions said only you could." There was a small brass lock. I used the key Mother had given me. The box opened. Inside were contracts, blueprints, share certificates, and a handwritten document dated 24 years earlier. I read it slowly. My grandfather had created a private investment trust, not for Vantage, for the employees who had helped build it. He had placed a portion of his personal holdings into the trust with one condition. If Vantage ever became controlled entirely by family interests, the trust could be activated. The beneficiaries were not the heirs. They were employees, long-serving workers, small suppliers, retired factory managers, people who had never received shares. My grandfather had wanted to make sure the company could never forget the people who built it. I looked at Father. "Did you know?" "No, not even about the trust." He shook his head. "Your grandfather kept it from all of us." I read the final clause. My name appeared, but not as owner, as trustee. I stared at it. "Why me?" Father smiled sadly. "Because he knew you were the only one who wouldn't use it for yourself." I didn't know what to say. For years, my family had fought over inheritance. Who deserved the company? Who deserved the title? Who deserved the money? Grandfather had apparently been thinking about something completely different. He had been thinking about responsibility. That evening, I gathered the trustees and lawyers. The trust was worth more than anyone expected. But there was a problem. The trust could only be activated if Vantage formally changed its corporate structure. That meant opening the company's ownership to employees. The board resisted immediately. One director called it dangerous. Another called it sentimental. Father remained silent. Marcus looked at me. "What do you think?" I thought about Grandfather's words. Never confuse belonging with obedience. Then I said, "I think he was right." The process took months. Legal challenges appeared. Former executives objected. Some shareholders threatened to sell. But we continued. And slowly, something extraordinary happened. Employees began speaking. Factory workers told stories about Grandfather. Retired managers came forward. Suppliers remembered how he had once personally guaranteed their loans. People who had never had a voice finally had one. The family name changed. Not because we made it bigger, because we finally understood what it was supposed to mean. Vantage became partially employee-owned. The trust funded education programs, retirement support, and modernization grants. And for the first time, the company stopped being defined by who sat at the head of the table. It became defined by the people inside it. Father retired completely after the transition. Marcus became head of operations under a professional CEO. Mother joined the foundation. And I remained outside. That was important. I didn't want control. I wanted distance. One evening, Father came to Meridian Works. He walked through the factory floor without saying anything. Workers greeted him. Some recognized him. Some didn't. He looked at the machines. Then at me. Your grandfather would have been proud. I smiled. Maybe. He shook his head. No. He looked around. He would have been proud because you didn't become what we expected. I laughed softly. That sounds like a strange compliment. It is. We stood together in silence. Then Father said something that surprised me. I want to sell my remaining shares. I looked at him. To the trust. He nodded. Why? Because I finally realized the company was never mine. He looked tired, but it was my responsibility. That sentence stayed with me. For years, I had wanted him to admit he was wrong. Now he was doing more than that. He was letting go. I helped him complete the transfer. The final family-controlled shares were reduced to a minority position. The old dynasty was over. Not destroyed, just transformed. That night, Father called me before bed. Adrian, yes. Do you remember when you were 8 and Grandfather took you to the factory? Yes. He told me something that night. What? He said, that boy doesn't need the company. One day, the company will need what that boy understands. I smiled. I never knew he said that. I didn't understand it either. Father laughed quietly. Not until now. There was silence. Then he said, I'm sorry it took me so long. I looked at the ceiling. I know. I wish I could change it. You can't. I know. But you changed what came after. He was quiet. Then he said, that's enough. After we ended the call, Clara walked in my office. You look thoughtful. I found out my grandfather was smarter than all of us. She smiled. I suspected that. I handed her the final trust document. She read it, then looked at me. What are you going to do now? I thought about the question. For the first time, I had no family crisis to solve. No company to rescue. No person to prove myself to. I looked through the window. Meridian Works was expanding into 3 countries. Northbridge was thriving. Vantage had become healthier than it had been in years. My mother was happy. Marcus had found his own path. Father had finally learned how to rest. And I had Clara. I realized I'd spent years running toward something. Now I could simply stand still. I said, I want to live. She laughed. That's a good plan. The next year was the quietest year of my life. Not empty. Quiet. There was a difference. I traveled with Clara. We visited Meridian Work Centers. We met engineers. We attended small manufacturing conferences. We spent weekends in places where nobody knew my family name. Sometimes we would sit in a roadside cafe and argue about meaningless things. She liked tea. I liked coffee. She thought my taste in music was terrible. I thought hers was worse. It was ordinary, and ordinary had become precious to me. Then one evening, Mother called. Your father wants everyone together. Why? He says he's planning something. I immediately became suspicious. What kind of something? She laughed. You'll have to come and find out. The family dinner was held at the old house. The same house where I had packed one suitcase years earlier. When I arrived, Marcus opened the door. He smiled. You came. I said I would. He hugged me. It surprised both of us. Inside, Mother had prepared too much food. Father was sitting at the table. For a moment, I was 8 years old again. Then I noticed something. The dining room had changed. The portraits were gone. The walls had been repainted. The old family photographs were arranged differently. And on the wall was a photograph of Grandfather with the factory workers. Not alone. Not as an empire builder. As one person among many. Father stood. I wanted you all here because I want to say something. We sat. He looked at Marcus first. You became a better man after I stopped trying to make you my successor. Marcus smiled. Then Father looked at me. And you became a better man after I stopped trying to control you. I lowered my eyes. He continued. I spent years believing a family survived by keeping everyone close. He looked around the table. I was wrong. He took a breath. Sometimes a family survives because it learns how to let people become themselves. Mother reached for his hand. Father looked at me. I don't expect you to come home. I nodded. But I hope you know you're welcome. That sentence felt different from every invitation before it. There was no demand inside it. No guilt. No expectation. Just an open door. Thank you, I said. He smiled. Then he handed me an envelope. What is this? Your share of the old family property. I immediately pushed it back. I don't want it. He laughed. Listen first. I opened it. It wasn't ownership. It was a deed transferring the old factory to Meridian Works. I stared at him. You're giving me the factory? No. He corrected me. We're giving it to the company. I looked at Mother. She smiled. It was your grandfather's dream. I couldn't speak. The place where I had first learned to build things was now going to become a training center for young engineers. A beginning, not an inheritance. A legacy. I looked at Father. You're sure? He nodded. I finally understand the difference. He tapped the deed. This isn't about what you deserve. It is about what the place can become. My eyes burned. I looked down. For the first time in years, I felt no need to protect myself from my family. Not because they had become perfect, because I had become strong enough to accept their love without needing it to define me. Later that night, I walked outside. The garden was quiet. Clara joined me. You okay? I nodded. I think I finally came home. She smiled. But you're not staying. No. She laughed. Good. I looked at the house. For years, I had thought leaving it meant losing my family. Now I understood. Leaving had allowed me to discover what family could actually be. Not control. Not inheritance. Not obedience. Choice. I turned toward Clara. There's something I want to ask you. She raised an eyebrow. What? I reached into my pocket. Her eyes widened. Adrian. I know. You're sure. For the first time in my life, I opened the small box. Inside was a simple ring. Nothing extravagant. Nothing designed to impress anyone. Just something I had chosen because it felt like us. Clara, will you build the rest of this life with me? She smiled through tears. Yes. She hugged me. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid that happiness could be taken away. Because I had finally learned something my younger self never understood. People can leave. Companies can collapse. Names can disappear from walls. Titles can be taken. Money can vanish. But the life you build inside yourself belongs to you. A few months later, we married quietly. No business magazines. No family announcements. Just the people who mattered. Mother cried. Marcus gave the worst speech in history. Father laughed harder than I had ever seen him laugh. And grandfather's old factory became our first training center. Years later, people would ask me how I built Northbridge. They wanted the business strategy, the technology, the investment story, the secret behind the success. I usually smiled, because the real beginning wasn't in a laboratory. It wasn't in a boardroom. It wasn't even in that tiny rented office. It began the night I walked away with one suitcase. At the time, I thought I had lost everything. I didn't know I had finally stopped carrying everything that wasn't mine. And that was the moment my real life began. 5 years after I walked away from Vantage, I stood on the stage of the old factory with my wife beside me. The building was no longer abandoned. It was full of people, young engineers, factory owners, students, researchers, former Vantage employees, people who had once believed they would never have a chance to build anything of their own. Behind us hung a simple sign, Meridian Innovation Center. No family crest, no photograph of me, no golden letters announcing an heir. Just a name. Clara squeezed my hand. You're nervous. I've spoken to thousands of people. And this feels different. She smiled. Why? I looked at the crowd. Because this place means more to me than any company I've ever built. The doors opened. People entered. And among them was my father. He walked slowly now. Age had changed him, but there was something peaceful about his face. Mother walked beside him. Marcus followed. He had changed too. He was no longer trying to become the next version of father. He had become himself. After the ceremony, Father approached me. You did it. I smiled. We did. He shook his head. No. He looked around the room. You did. I laughed. Still trying to give me all the credit? No. He pointed toward the young engineers. They did. That made me smile. We stood together watching them. A young woman approached. Mr. Vale? Yes. I wanted to thank you. For what? My father worked at Vantage for 30 years. I listened. He told me after the ownership changes that he finally felt like his work mattered. She smiled. I decided to become an engineer because of him. I didn't know what to say. So I simply said, thank you for telling me. She walked away. Father looked at me. Now I understand. What? Why you refused the inheritance. I smiled. I didn't refuse everything. No. He looked at the room. You chose a different inheritance. That sentence stayed with me. Later that evening, after everyone left, Clara and I walked through the empty factory. The machines were quiet. Sunset entered through the old windows. I touched one of the original workbenches. This was where grandfather had taught me to measure twice before cutting once. Where he had told me that machines never lied. People did. But people could also change. I thought about Marcus. About father. About mother. About myself. There was no bitterness left. Only memory. Clara stood beside me. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't left? All the time. What do you think? I smiled. I probably would have become someone I didn't like. She leaned against me. And if your father had promoted you, I would have stayed. And if Marcus had supported you, maybe. And if your mother had spoken up, I thought about that one. Maybe I wouldn't have learned how to stand alone. She looked at me. So you don't regret it? I regret the pain. I paused. But not the person I became because I survived it. That was the truth. The following morning, I received an unexpected call. It was from a journalist. She wanted to interview me about the history of Vantage and Northbridge. I almost declined. Then she asked one question. Do you believe your family's rejection was the reason for your success? I thought about it. No. She sounded surprised. Why not? Because pain can push you forward, but it can't tell you where to go. I looked across my office. The rejection opened a door. I smiled, but I still had to choose what to build after walking through it. That became the headline of the interview. The heir who walked away. Why Adrian Vale never took back his family's empire. The article spread around the world. People expected a revenge story. They wanted to believe I had secretly built Northbridge just to destroy Vantage. They wanted a dramatic war between brothers. They wanted my father to beg. But the truth was less dramatic and much more difficult. Nobody lost everything. Nobody was humiliated. There was no final victory parade. Instead, there were years of difficult conversations. Change behavior, boundaries, forgiveness, work, and the slow rebuilding of trust. That was what people rarely saw. They saw the company. They didn't see the nights I wondered whether leaving had been a mistake. They didn't see the failed contracts, the empty bank account, the employee who quit, the first time I couldn't make payroll. They didn't see Clara sitting beside me at 3 in the morning saying, tomorrow is another day. Don't lose tonight because you're afraid of tomorrow. They didn't see my mother learning how to apologize without making excuses. They didn't see my father learning how to ask instead of command. They didn't see Marcus learning that leadership wasn't about being chosen. It was about becoming trustworthy. Those things were the real story. One Sunday, years after the family dinner, I visited my father. He was sitting in the garden. I brought coffee. He smiled. You still drink that terrible stuff? You still complain about it? Yes. We laughed. Then he became quiet. Adrian. Yes. Do you know what I'm most proud of? What? You didn't become bitter. I looked at him. That wasn't easy. I know. He looked toward the trees. After you left, I was angry. I know. I thought you were punishing me. I wasn't. I understand that now. He paused. You were saving yourself. I nodded. Yes. He looked at me. I wish I'd understood sooner. So do I. But I understand now. I smiled. That's what matters. He nodded. We sat in silence. For years, I had imagined a dramatic apology for my father. A perfect speech. A moment where every wound disappeared. Real life wasn't like that. There was no sentence capable of erasing 20 years. But there was something better. Two people sitting together without pretending. That was enough. The last time I stood in front of my family as the heir of Vantage, I had been carrying a folder full of solutions nobody wanted. The last time I stood in front of them as Adrian, I carried nothing. That difference changed everything. Years later, the company my family once fought over had become something completely different. Vantage was professionally managed. Employees own a meaningful share. The old factories were modernized. Meridian Works had expanded across continents. Northbridge had become one of the largest independent technology firms in the industry. And I had never taken the position my family once expected me to fight for. I didn't need it. My father passed away quietly many years later. Before he died, he gave me one final letter. I opened it alone. It wasn't long. He wrote that he had spent most of his life trying to build an empire strong enough to protect his family. Then he realized he had almost lost the family while protecting the empire. He thanked me for teaching him that love wasn't ownership. At the end, he wrote, "You walked away from the company, but you never walked away from us." That was the part one misunderstood. I folded the letter. I cried that night, not because I was still wounded, because I wasn't. That was how I knew I had finally healed. Years earlier, I thought healing meant forgetting. It didn't. It meant remembering without needing the past to change. Mother continued living nearby. Marcus became a respected executive in his own right. Clara and I built a family of our own. Our children grew up around factories and engineers and business meetings. But I never told them they were expected to inherit anything. One evening, my daughter asked me, "Dad, why don't you make us work at your company?" I laughed. "Because it's my company." She frowned. "Don't you want us to continue it?" "I want you to continue whatever you love." "What if I want to become a teacher?" "Then become a great teacher." "What if my brother wants to be a musician?" "Then he should become a great musician." She smiled. "And if we want to work with you, then you can apply." She laughed. "Apply?" "Yes. Even though I'm your daughter? Especially because you're my daughter." She rolled her eyes. "You're strict." "I'm fair." She ran away laughing. I watched her disappear down the hallway, and I remembered being 8 years old. Grandfather had once told me that the quietest person in the room could sometimes see the farthest. At the time, I thought he was teaching me about business. He wasn't. He was teaching me about life. There are moments when fighting is necessary. There are moments when you must defend yourself. But there are also moments when the strongest thing you can do is stop fighting for a place that should have been yours without a battle. I walked away from my family because I had reached the end of my patience. I built Northbridge because I needed independence. I expanded Meridian Works because I wanted purpose. I repaired my relationship with my family because I chose forgiveness. And I refused to return advantage because I had learned that forgiveness did not require surrender. For a long time, people call me the lost heir, the vanished son, the forgotten successor, the man who disappeared. They were wrong. I hadn't disappeared. I had simply stopped standing where everyone expected me to stand. My family thought they had moved on from me. In reality, I had moved on from the version of myself who needed them to choose me. And that was why my secret company changed the entire family. Not because it became bigger than Vantage. Not because it made me richer. Not because it embarrassed the people who had rejected me. It changed them because it forced all of us to confront the same truth. A family legacy isn't measured by who inherits the largest share. It's measured by what the next generation chooses to do with what it was given. My grandfather gave us a company. My father gave me pressure. My family gave me rejection. Life gave me another chance. Not a second life. Not a reset. Just a new morning after I finally walked away. And I built something from it. Something that belonged to me. Something I could share without surrendering myself. Something my children could admire without being trapped by it. One evening, Clara and I stood outside Meridian's headquarters. The lights of the city stretched beyond us. She slipped her hand into mine. "Do you ever miss the old days?" I thought about the mansion, the boardroom, the family dinners, the old factory, the arguments, the night I left. I smiled. I miss some people, not the life. "No." "Why?" I looked at her. "Because I finally understand something." "What?" "I didn't lose my place in the family." I squeezed her hand. "I found my place in the world." She smiled. We walked home together. No cameras followed us. No reporters waited outside. No board members called. No one asked who the next heir would be. For the first time, there was nothing left to prove. And that was the real ending. Not that my family regretted losing me. Not that my company surpassed theirs. Not that the heir they forgot became successful. The real victory was much quieter. I built a life that didn't need their approval. I loved people without losing myself. I forgave without returning to the place that had hurt me. And when I finally looked back at the boy who had walked away with one suitcase, I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt proud, because he had been brave enough to leave before he knew where he was going. And sometimes, that's how a person finds everything. Not by holding tighter, but by finally letting go.